Perfect. Just confirm you guys can see the screen okay? Raul, you can see my screen, all good? Cool.
Yeah, I can see your screen.
Yeah, perfect. So we'll kick it off. No doubt people will keep jumping in. Obviously, you want to be respectful of everyone's busy schedules, but this has been as a webinar content perspective, one that's resonated more than probably any that we've done or certainly spoken about doing. And a really, really exciting and cool part about this is with Inforcer, who we got Raul, and we'll do intros in a sec, and CloudOlive, we've actually started to build a number of very, very good joint clients across the globe. And the feedback in how they're utilizing the two technologies to make a lot more money and sleep easier at night around their Microsoft stack is awesome. So we want to share some of those learnings that we've had from our customer bases and hopefully some key takeaways, which we'll obviously talk about as well as we go through it. So just in terms of housekeeping, there's a chat box in Zoom. So if there's questions that crop up during the webinar, just please punch them in at that time. We'll do our best to answer them in real time. If not, there's likely to be some time at the end for some Q&A that we can absolutely try to do that as well. This will be recorded. Everybody who has registered will get a copy as well in the next day or so once we complete it. So I guess that's it. Let's kick into it. So in terms of today's speakers, so my name's Adam and I'm one of the co-founders of CloudOlive. And I was actually just thinking about it. I've been in the MSP world now for near on 15 years, having worked in an MSP just out of university and had a sales role there. And then what the thinking back in the founding of CloudOlive and why that problem, why we're focusing on it and why we needed really to solve it was, I remember back in working at the MSP, we used to misbill our customers and it was very difficult to just tell them how many licenses they had across their different technologies that they paid us for. Never a good look. We didn't run a PSA at the time. And then I met the team at Autotask and they explained what they did. And I was like, oh God, well, you take the whole end customer lifecycle of an MSP and stick it in one system. Great. So if you had that, if we had that, then I wouldn't have been presenting incorrect information. Lo and behold, that problem just got worse and worse and worse and worse. And we had hundreds of Autotask partners go, so how does everybody else manage the license fluctuations across all of the vendors every month? Everyone must have this problem. How does everyone else solve it? And we never had an answer. Okay, so that spawned us to try and solve that problem, like stopping MSPs leaking revenue. Okay, hence why we're spending our time today to talk about Microsoft in particular. And I'll hand it over to you, Raul, to talk through your very recent picture there.
Yeah, thanks, Adam. I guess not so recently. We met, 2015 when I was at Autotask.
Probably when that photo was taken, yeah.
Yeah, that photo is a bit out of date, but that you recognize that from the Autotask days. But prior to Inforcer, we were running a go-to-market agency for MSPs in the UK. So where we got first-hand experience and insight on how MSPs were productizing and selling Microsoft. So excited to share some angles around that, but then also I've been taking Inforcer to market in Australia and New Zealand since January.
Yeah, awesome. So I guess the insights today coming from me as one of the co-founders of the company and a director of Inforcer, just seeing so many patterns across MSPs, so many common challenges and problems. How can we actually help? What takeaways can we actually give? So in terms of the flow for today, there's a couple of trends here. It's quite Australian focused, New Zealand focused initially. But you can see the adoption globally, and you can no doubt it will no doubt resonate with your geography if you're calling in from overseas as well. And then the next one here is leveraging more from Microsoft, like the amount of time and questions that come certainly from a billing perspective when it comes to any of the vendors. It's always Microsoft seems to be the first sort of cab off the rank of people wanting additional assistance, and there's no doubt probably 60-70% of the cost when it comes to subscriptions. Raul's going to share some amazing revenue generating opportunities that are really tied directly to tailwind trends that even the government is enforcing over this decade. And it's worthwhile sort of just listening and seeing how far along that sort of adoption curve you are in your own MSP world. Then we'll dive into pricing strategies. Like, it's one thing, do you charge Microsoft at RRP? Like, we've seen every possible permutation of what people do and don't do. And also dial into when, like, how and what you can look out from some of the first very high level audit you should do across wherever you buy your Microsoft from to dictate whether or not you should then ask additional questions around it. And then the last bit, this will tie into some key percentage revenue cash flow gains. How much leakage in terms of revenue you're likely having across Microsoft? Is that one problem you stay awake at night at? Or is it more customers asking you questions around license counts, which is the problem that I personally had at the MSP once upon a time. And our big thing is like automate responsibly, like identify hard to reach information and then make strategic calls off the back of it. All right. So we wouldn't normally start with who we are per se, but when the calls were going around, there were people on the end of the call going, sorry, who's on this webinar? I've registered for what? Who's this? So we just want to take 2 seconds just to give you an idea of where we sit in the actual MSP ecosystem. Okay. So CloudOlive's main goal when we started 4.5 years ago was is it possible across all the hundreds of suppliers out there in the MSP world that you resell, can we stop you underbilling? Can we stop you misbilling? Can we stop your vendors stepping out of line and double billing you? Like any billing risk that it involves any of your suppliers and the way in which you invoice your customers, we sit in that layer, okay, talking and interacting with any vendor under the sun, okay? And then I'll pass it over to yourself, Raul, to talk through where Inforcer sits within the Microsoft stack.
Sure. I guess, Adam, before that, there was a question that always pops up is with CloudOlive, things like you had PAX 8 on the previous slide, and then you've got
cool, yep.
Task. I thought, so from my understanding, PAX 8 integrates with Autotask. So how does CloudOlive fit in between there?
Yeah, cool. PAX 8's been doing phenomenally well in, I'd say solving Microsoft problems primarily, right? That's why a lot of people likely are going to be joining. The highest percentage of our customer base globally, we reconcile the PAX 8 invoice on a monthly basis to ensure that nothing has gone wrong. Okay, so we always say, like, if you've got an integration, leave it on, absolutely. But if your cost is north of $10,000 of Microsoft per month, you need to be checking that monthly, whether it's a PAX 8 integration or a Ripe integration or any of the distributors, or even more importantly, if you're leveraging a third party that talks directly to Partner Center and avoids any costing information from your distributor, it's even more important to just sanity check. So actually, it's one of the points I was going to touch on later. Like what I would recommend is if you're running whatever PSA or billing system you're using, your outlying cost for your Microsoft stack, because it's on an invoice each month, just run a quick report across all your Microsoft things going through your business and look at those 2 numbers and do they match? Okay. And if they will be off, like, trust me, they'll be off. And I'll walk you through how far off and why they're off during this call. And just some quick sort of tips that you can take away. Hopefully that helps, Raul.
Yeah, thanks. And I guess just a quick intro to us. Our platform enables you to standardize 365 security policies across multiple tenants. So 3 main ways we're helping MSPs. So configure and set up tenants faster and more accurately. Usually here it takes like 24 hours to 30 hours to set up a tenancy, and then keep clients aligned to best practices and monitor for policy drift as changes happen. Microsoft makes changes over time. And then I guess what we're talking about today, ultimately utilize more of the Microsoft suite. So consolidate, roll in new services into your security stack. And that's why I feel like we're well positioned to give some examples and talk about this problem and how MSPs are capitalizing on the opportunity.
Yeah, cool. And even just on the far right, because we reconcile for a number of Inforcer partners now that resell Inforcer to their customers. And I've been blown away by the numbers in terms of the cost versus what they're making from it. And again, big part why if there's CloudOlive partners on this call, it's phenomenal. Like the revenue they're making off of, we're seeing it firsthand. And yeah, hopefully you can learn something with Raul. So we'll kick into some of the trends, some of the tailwinds really that are working in your favor. So Raul, do you want to take us through what some of these graphs that we can see?
Yeah, I guess, first and foremost, just to quantify the opportunity. So the fact that we found Australia third in terms of number of users and companies using 365, and especially if you compare it to the US and UK, a much higher proportion of the population and companies are already using it. I'm sure most people on the call are kind of aware of that, but it's then to start thinking about how as an MSP do you differentiate yourself? So we've already seen MSPs aligning themselves as maybe Microsoft only vendors, so rebranding in that sense, creating like modern workplace practices and really pumping out content to build authority with their end users. So hopefully we've got some ideas on what to do next. Adam, like as the founder of a SaaS business, the final image was something I think that really resonated with you with the adoption of Teams. Like, why was that something that you wanted to include?
Yeah, good. We were actually, my co-founder and I, we met in a startup incubator, right? So we were with 80 other founders, and it was sort of like speed dating to find a founder, and then you get pitched to people and they'll give you some cash at the end. So we went through that very intense 12-week program. But during that time, they talked a lot about product market fit. Like that's the key thing for a startup. Have it grow exponentially, amazing. This slide was shared in our Slack channel, actually, in that incubator. And I was like, oh, guys, check this out. How incredible, like product market fit, perfect. And someone came back and went, no, it's product market steal. Microsoft have got such deep roots into every single human really in Australia, it seems, based on these stats, but every single company primarily, that they were able to switch on Teams overnight, and it decimated, and Slack eventually got sold, of course, to Salesforce. But it was just it was an eye-opening moment, because it was like, when Microsoft invests behind something, they typically, or for the last 10, 15 years, they've really, really done well and excelled in whatever they're investing their R&D in particular. And a lot of the adoption behind those 75 mil that grew near enough overnight, it looks like that hockey stick. No doubt MSPs on this call played a key role in getting that deployed and into the small to medium and larger businesses. That was it.
Nice.
So let's talk through this.
Yeah, I guess with regards to differentiation, like let's focus on a couple of factors that you can use to create some compelling events when speaking to your customers, specifically related to selling security to SMBs. As we were always told, that was a challenge. You know, when we ran our go-to-market agency, we always heard that from the MSPs, the end users don't want to pay for security. They think they're too small, nothing will go wrong. But I think what everyone has probably experienced, if something does go wrong, it's the MSP that's to blame. We recently onboarded a partner who lost a customer because that customer refused to roll out MFA. They opted out, then was breached. So even though the MSP had advised them to do it, the fact that they didn't and then still were breached, they lost that customer. So now they roll that out as a default. So in terms of convincing small to medium-sized businesses on how to take cybersecurity seriously, I think a solution is to lean on the credibility of government initiatives to create that compelling event. I know this is Australia focused, and also our our New Zealand partners also tell me this is relevant to what they're doing. But you know, if you're from the US or or EMEA, you can substitute a local framework. The core is still the same. If it's important enough for a government to fund it, to create training and awareness, you can't really deny that it's not a problem. So the message to customers is, it's already happening. We're almost halfway there, so it's 2025 almost. What are you doing about it? I had a couple of MSPs tell me they're always interested in stats that impact SMEs. So like a couple of things, I think for SMBs, it takes them significantly longer to recover from any incident. And also proportionally, it costs them about $180,000 to recover from an attack compared to $110,000 for a larger company. And then about 60% of small businesses will close within 6 months of experiencing an attack. So this is all about creating that messaging. And if you were to Google this strategy, the first company that comes up is an MSP in Australia that's talking around it, not the Australian government. So it's already some forward-thinking partners are already starting to capitalize on this angle. Could we go to the next slide, please? And then, of course, there's another government-driven initiative, which is the Essential 8, which is more like a guideline. But I mean, this really shows you how prevalent Microsoft is within the space. It's rare to see a government framework that is not that vendor agnostic. It's written with Microsoft mentioned. And look, as we see, a lot of MSPs we see are already utilizing this, but I think the ones that we've seen do this best is partners that are recognizing that this is more of a guideline, and they would say they would need to align to a more robust framework like the CIS controls, which our baseline covers, something like ISO 27001, and then use this more for reporting to clients.
I remember this being in the news 5+ years ago. All the roundtables at the time, all the publications would be. How well do you believe it's been adopted with everyone you're speaking with?
I think people are doing a reasonable job. Maybe the reporting could be better. Even on the government website, they're publishing now scripts that you can run against your client site to check on the maturity, which is pretty cool if even the government is doing that. I haven't seen many people utilize like level 3 maturity of the Essential 8, because that kind of locks your clients down. You can't really get much done. I think the reason we put this in there is this is the opportunity, because end users understand Essential 8. They're not really sure what to do about it, but it's taking that and almost rolling your services around that. So to answer your question, the best partners are the ones that use this as a way to drive growth while aligning to maybe more robust frameworks internally.
Yeah, cool.
So we looked at market factors. Then it's like, well, what within Microsoft can enable MSPs to almost capitalize on that, and also then start thinking about securing the attack surface in general. As an example, so this is a Defender we're talking about here. I know it's had a bad reputation in the past. It's funny, I had an MSP last week telling us that they saw on the Gartner Magic Quadrant that basically Microsoft is now positioned as a leader. They invest more in R&D than these other providers have in revenue put together. So the growth in that product means they're now in a position where they can start thinking about moving their 10K a month spend from one of these vendors off onto a platform that they already get as part of the business premium licenses. So the idea is, if you can move away from these expensive third-party solutions, align as a Microsoft security provider, that uptick in cash flow, what could you do with that? You could hire more people, grow the business, acquire another MSP. So it's more thinking about where you could allocate that extra cash flow.
And is business premium, when you speak with partners, is it the reason business premium listed there because that typically aligns to the end client profile the MSP should be having this conversation with?
In Australia, especially, there's a really high adoption of business premium. And that's primarily because, yes, you do get some of these tools as standard. I think there are a few challenges that are stopping, which, I mean, if we could transition to the next slide while we talk about that. There are a few challenges and opportunities for MSPs to utilize business premium more. But in short, it's really, that is where you start getting some of the more interesting solutions. Like you can start using Intune, for example, and that in itself covers some of the Essential 8. So it's all a joint story. And I think the MSPs have actually done a good job of rolling out premium. Now it's about actually utilizing what's in there and what people are already paying you for. And that's when I talk about more cash flow, because you already have those tools, move the cost away from the third-party providers.
I guess there's also project work as well available for if someone's not fully deployed. Because this is one of the things when I was working at Auditask, so people would throw money at Auditask in order to implement that tool better. And I'm sure it's the same for any big system, right? But MSPs, some do, not all though, really value their time around that. But it's worthwhile. People see that as super valuable in getting more out of their tool set and stack. And these when there's new data provided to MSPs, there's a really sharp opportunity just to have a quick conversation to see if there's some additional value that you can sort of share together with your own customers.
Yeah, nice. And we've got some examples later actually in how some partners are auditing the environment, and you said projects, and then identifying, okay, well, that client needs a tenant hardening exercise, for example. So we can touch on that. But big picture, it's what's stopping everyone from doing this. You know, from our side, what we've seen is basically Intune and Microsoft in general, it's a complex environment. Does everyone have the expertise internally? Like, even though MSPs are experts in security, they still don't know everything. So, and I think it's that maybe that knowledge and expertise gap on one side, which is stopping them. And then Adam, I think you've seen a lot around like the cost management side.
I dream cost management, Raul. I literally have nightmares about it as well. No, 100%. This like every MSP every month should check every line item that their end customer is about to see, and hopefully just pay. And hopefully it's ideally it's accurate, and your customer just gradually builds trust that they can just pay their invoices fairly blindly. A big part on that, when we look at a new MSP we're speaking with, one of the first things we do is we sync across their audit task or ConnectWise, and we go look at their naming conventions from products or services. And this comes into this standardization piece down the bottom left. We've got a pretty good idea from the naming conventions listed whether or not this is going to be an easy implementation, and also the MSP's admin teams are probably like love and live, don't spend too much time on it, or they generally lay awake at night worrying about revenue leakage or customers asking them questions. A big part is understanding the right naming conventions. And then from there, it's fascinating. It just flows through the entire business. Okay, so standardization is one, and I'll talk through another key one here in a sec with regards to actually defining a source of truth. So what does best of breed look like when we're looking at MSPs? And again, it could be a portion is really good in this MSP and another portion is, but in general, what does really good look like? Firstly, everything is on build. Okay, there's no revenue leakage around that. If a simple stat, and this has been for 4 years now, it's scaled incredibly strangely consistently, is for every 100 line items that you're buying from a vendor, if you're manually checking them, the team's manually checking them to on-build them, 5 of those line items will not be getting on-build in your PSA. 5 of them, okay? The other thing is charging RRP at an absolute minimum. There's although it's majority, I'd say like 80% of the people we're working with, more than that, are billing at RRP. There's a lot of MSPs that do not. They do not bill at RRP, and you can make more money on Microsoft on that side, up and slightly, as well as depending on what you're getting, because it's a near commodity from a distributor perspective. Have a conversation with your distributor, or talk to us, and we can give you a bit of insight into like, is it a fair scale that you're working at? There's always room to negotiate on that side as well. And that's just pure cash flow, pure cash flow uplift. This next one stems back from the standardization. This is something that I speak about on a daily basis on every single demonstration we ever have of CloudOlive, is trying to help and understand what do you define as a user within your end client environment. And how well, if you asked the different departments in your business that same question, what would be the response that everyone would get unprompted? The key of that is if you can decide at a management layer and then sort of articulate that to the sales, admin, client, then it makes such an impact when it comes to the eventual invoice landing on your client's desk and them going, yeah, cool, we're good here. And the last one, there's a ton of capability in these tool sets that the companies like Inforcer can really just help add way more value to your customers, and in doing so, creating some IP on top of it that at this moment in time is very unique in the market. Inforcer has been going for a couple of years, going incredibly well overseas, and launched and got a team of 4 or 5 down here in Australia now. You'll hear a lot more of that name, and I'm keen to be working with Raul to see how we can sort of get that information into our CloudOlive partners, and hopefully they can make a ton more money with it. But here's a big stat for you. So I talked about every 100 lines, 5 won't exist. In general, right, with Microsoft, the very first thing we want to try and do is audit and understand where in this spectrum are you. So what good looks like, we talked about those 4 points. Cool. When we actually come into it and we double check it, as you go through it, is everything mapped? Yes or no? How's your margin on a line item basis? Okay, it's not going to be optimized totally. Do you bill at RRP for every single line? simple yes and no answers as we work through this. In general, for every $10,000 of revenue you're making around the Microsoft stack and some other vendors, but we'll stick with Microsoft, we anticipate that there's somewhere between $500 to $700 of additional revenue just by getting it right, just by working through this piece of the puzzle. And it's not rocket science. It's really, really not rocket science, especially if naming conventions are fairly coherent. This is what to anticipate initially, and then the time savings eventually, sort of from month 2, 3 onwards, become really, really dramatic, okay? And you can sort of spend your time talking to your customers. And what does that then mean? We've got some real world examples here where a far smaller client where they have got about $5,000 worth of cost with their distributor, both at tier 2 here, both the tier 2 MSPs, just at much, much different scales, of course. The one on the right was a very large UK-based MSP that gave us their analysis in terms of what CloudOlive went in and found around their Microsoft stack when everything was trued up and everything was looking good, okay, eventually. So have a think about where your revenue is from a Microsoft perspective, and then just think, like, wouldn't it be nice to have an extra 5 to 7%? And hopefully it's 2% because it's really, really dialed in. But having an extra set of eyes to audit that, ideally every month if you're north of 10K, is in our eyes essential. We're just based on what we see every single sort of billing cycle MSPs go through. Well, I guess in terms of what we've been through so far, we've been through some of the trends and the tailwinds, and especially around some of the government initiatives that are really going to be aiding and helping the message that MSPs can drive to their customers to hopefully improve their end customer security posture. Do you want to talk through now how or where, I guess, where Inforcer really fits into this market and why you guys are seeing such robust growth?
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks. If you could go to the next slide, I think that just helps understand how we've mapped out and our partners and the types of MSPs when we're trying to work out where they need to go next in their journey and what opportunities there are for them on the Microsoft side. Today, since this webinar is making more on Microsoft, I'm going to focus mostly on the right-hand side where everyone's got a good level of Microsoft adoption. The left is more like break fix or large managed print providers that are moving into the services space. So the right-hand side is where most MSPs sit. Now, if you think like bottom right or like along like good Microsoft adoption, but maybe less Microsoft expertise, a lot of MSPs end up there because the barriers to entry are very high in terms of getting that expertise internally. I think about 45% of MSPs cited a lack of comprehensive training and awareness about Intune's full capabilities as like a significant barrier to full utilization. The solution to that is, or what we're trying to push is rely on our best practices, our baselines to try and bridge that knowledge gap and hopefully move more to the top right. That's where, you know, we see most of our most successful partners in terms of the margins they're making. That's because they're selling a productized 365 security offering, like maybe Secure Score as a service. We will help keep your secure score above 70%, and this will keep you in line with the minimum security requirements, Mr. End Customer. That's the type of way we're seeing it positioned. Obviously, with Secure Score, it's a bit of a love-hate relationship. It's a bit of a black box, but it's something end users do understand. And now we're even seeing, a partner was telling me that their customer's insurance provider was asking what their secure score is as part of assessing their secure score and their insurance compliance. So now you're starting to see other industries also start looking at the secure score. So all of this explains why it's important. And then basically the partners that have this just lack a platform that will enable the above. So if we could go to the next slide, like how to move to that top right quadrant. A lot of that is just maximizing what you've got within Business Premium. If you've got that one solution, I know Adam's talked about naming conventions. If you've got an integrated suite that you're using, that just makes it a lot easier for your techs to work out problems and solve them again and again in the same way, which by extension will mean it's easier to hire people because, again, it might be hard to hire Microsoft experts, but there's more of them than let's say, experts in third-party tools that are less well known. So if we identify like what the opportunity is on the security policy side, the main things, if we could go to the next slide, please. Thanks. The main things, really, the three things stopping people from being able to do this is, first of all, like the fact that Microsoft is always making changes. Most MSPs lack the resources to keep up to date with all those latest best practice configs. There's always a gradual drift. Our partners, one of them, said to me, and it really resonated, our most secure deployment was our latest. So yes, someone we set up last week is really secure, but what about everyone you set up 2 years ago? How have you accounted for that drift from your best practice to now? And how are you bringing them back up to that level of security? From there, then it's okay. Well, setting up tenants is a very time-consuming and complex task. About 24 to 30 hours on average per tenant. Huge number of policies to manage, and manually applying them just causes mistakes. If you imagine just in practice if you've got 50 customers, having each admin center open, copying across from an Excel spreadsheet, that is bound to create errors. And then from there, if you're not able to see all your tenants in one dashboard, as changes are made, do you even know if, let's say, you're co-managing IT, if the IT department has turned off MFA for some reason, who's turning that back on? Who knows if that's happened? So it's that lack of visibility. So those would be the three main problems. If I was to then dig into the solutions one by one, if we could go to the next slide, please. The first point is just bring your clients into a platform and see what customers are doing right, where the gaps are. Adam talked about projects. One of our larger customers in the UK, there's about 500 tenants. Our team went on site, just ran this across all their clients. And you just start to work out, okay, well, this customer has gaps here. This is actually a tenant hardening project that we need to be billing them for. So it's just a case of sitting down, working through who's in a good place, which configurations are working well, and how can I then take those and apply them to my other customers. And then obviously monitoring this on an ongoing basis. From there, if you start to identify then, okay, thanks. I know what's a best practice. I know what's a baseline I would like to align my customers to, whether that's Essential 8, whether that's CIS. Then it's about, okay, going through and actually updating all your customers. In this example, you can see this customer is 93% aligned to my baseline. Then it's at a click of a button, I can see what's missing and fill in those gaps. So in this example, you can see someone's turned on Russia as an allowed location. So it's just a case of making sure you're aware of that and remediating that.
Okay, just a quick one on the similar policies there. Well, is that then reading other existing policies that maybe another customer has that is close but not the same? Is that what that's trying to show?
Yeah, that's a good question. So originally we just used to do name matches, but then as we found, and I think you find this on the billing side, MSPs have set up all their customers and the naming conventions are quite all over the place. So what we're also looking for is then configuration matches where the naming might be different, as you see here, and then you can just go through and rename all your customers' policies to what's in your baseline. So again, it's that standardization and creating it. What we're trying to do here is take the policy config away from your level 3s and maybe allowing the service desk, your level 1s, to solve problems because it's the same for every customer. It's not every customer has completely different configurations that takes like 10 minutes to even work out what the problem is. And then finally, the idea is once we identify what the gaps are, it's like, okay, we've got a standard baseline. I just want to push this out to my customers. Or if I've made an update, like in this example, I just want to push these 2 policies out. I imagine how long this would take across 500. Some of our customers have 900 tenants. So it's all about doing this quickly and accurately and then pushing it through. So it's the efficiencies, the standardization, and the security and compliance. If I could go to the next slide, just talking around how partners then try and actually productize this and get extra revenue. Usually what happens is people roll this out and understand that the efficiencies will cover the cost of what we're charging, but it's always nice to then get margin on top of that. The two best ways I've seen this, first will be maybe a more entry level backup of the configurations and policies. Again, that's something a lot of insurance companies now are requiring to stay compliant. Are you backing up the 365 configurations? So we've seen that really easily to say, okay, we'll just charge Mr. Customer, you have to have this. It's $100 per customer, which, for you with a 50 user account, you barely even notice it. We will enable that for you. And that's where you're basically covering our cost. I think more advanced to that is this more tenant hardening piece where you might create a $400 a month service. These are all just guidelines, examples of how customers are doing it. But we will implement our best practice security baseline, maintain it, monitor it, and as changes are made, we will update them. So those are two examples of ways I've seen it done well.
Do you get partners that, because I assume that it's per tenant, that it's purchased based on what we're seeing here, but do you get them spinning it to be per user build out?
We do, because most MSPs charge their customers per user. Like you said, we're doing it per tenant, which works well because that's what we're covering. But yeah, we have seen an uplift of like $2 per user as well. So I've seen both basically.
Cool. I guess it's a good segue into coming back to the source of truth. But this has been such a key element of trying to help MSPs and guide them on to working out internally, what do we define as this? It could be for a full user, a light user, even other parameters and the ways you buy certain devices, of course, is a very cool server or workstation. There's a few others, but we'll stick to user-based here. Why it's so important is from less thinking about leaking revenue from your perspective, but thinking, what do my customers expect to see on their invoice? The truth of it is, if you get billing queries come back, okay, if you get billing queries come back, I'm sure everyone in this call sees it as the client's asking why they've got one more AV than the number of something. Hey, we've got 25 on the invoice of Datto SaaS in this example, but we know we've only got 24 business premium, and people were like, why is that? And that $5 cost is a extra call, extra time. Like, it just sucks. Everyone, I'm sure, can resonate with that. We've seen it where end clients have then said, listen, we need to understand what's changing. Can you send us a pre-billing report for the next 4 or 5 months so we can keep on top of this? And it's like, oh man, it's 15 seat end customer, and it's just a lot of time for the MSP to then deal with. Like, a way to think about this is, if you break out what you're billing to your customers, if they do see it on an invoice, have an idea of what they're anticipating and expecting to see. So having a source of truth, business premium is a great one. We've been talking about it a lot. It could be business premium and the E1 and E3 or whatever. Like, it typically indicates a full user, that's in our gold, okay? And the silver might be something different. It might be the business basic, and then bronze down here. Just an example, it's another source of truth count in something else. The customer, when they're aligned like this, they're expecting to see something more aligned to this, okay? That's what they're expecting. How CloudOlive has looked to build this over time, and I guess just before we even get to that, is why this is so crucial. It helps from a quality control standpoint ensure what you're getting billed from your distributor is spot on, which is even harder now that you could be committing to an NCE count, even though for a year, or typically a year at the max, I guess, but the assigned count underneath that may be different. So you need to be able to split those two things apart and understand what's going on. QA technicians, like, the second this piece is rolled out, in general, it takes 5 minutes to roll out, and you will learn based on the source of truth to say those counts, anything that you're buying per user, what is not getting switched off, what process is breaking down within the MSP, with often offboarding tech or offboarding end users with peripheral technologies. may not be the business premium. I'm sure everyone's much more aligned to like getting that thing right. But all the other external, all the other peripheral services are typically are billed out to as a per user. And I think most importantly is your customers are expecting something, and when they see something else, it gradually just chips away at the trust between everyone and takes everyone mind share and time away from doing what they really want to be doing. We look at the month-end billing processes like a headache. Often people are like, when we're talking to people like, what do you want to solve? Like, why are we talking? And just like, we want it automated. And I'm like, okay, it means you want to save time, I think, because if it's automated, you still need to be accurate. But we look at it as two sides. Like, rather than think month-end billing headache, it's like, what problem are you trying to solve? Like, it's either going to be revenue leakage. We lay awake at night because we're worried that what we're getting charged for is not going through the business. Key problem to solve first. Okay, another completely different problem needs to be solved on its own is our customers are asking a lot of questions about what we're billing them. Like our unit counts aren't accurate, clearly, because we're getting queries. Two problems, whichever one you're having within your business, and or you're like, you know, it's pretty good, but we spend too much time on this. We've got 2 people in admin that run this process, or a full-time person. Do we bring on a contract manager? You probably don't need to do any of that thing. Okay, so from a visual perspective, okay, any supply, but we'll focus in on the distributors, or if you buy direct from Microsoft, it's the same. If you're getting billed more than 10K, I really recommend at least probably around 10K, probably once every other month. You want to be checking it. I think every month. If you're north of say 20, 30K, the amount of drift that happens between onboarding, offboarding, contracts in your PSA getting expired for some reason, or user error or something, right? You have to be checking these things every single month. So we built a way that you can very easily see at a vendor level, and then at the most granular line by line item subscription level, what's a billing risk to you and your business. Okay. And what it then leaves with is where are you under or over billing and how much money you're making. And we don't take any unit cost out of your PSA for these calculations because they're notoriously hard to manage at any form of scale. We do help you fix them though. Okay, so your Autotask and or ConnectWise gradually gets more and more accurate, and you can trust the customer profitability reporting out of them. At my time at Autotask for near on a decade, it was people bought those systems to be able to see at a click of a button, where are we tracking with this customer in terms of its profitability. Very few MSPs seem to actually achieve that. And this is a very key part because it removes a lot of the fragmentation across all your suppliers, especially around Microsoft. Okay, so any of the distributors, we've likely got many partners we're working with already. And the next one is coming back to the source of truth. Okay, so in our world, you look at the primary circle there, we go, business premium in our MSP, we dictate that to be our source of truth. That is our primary. We tell it to the sales reps, our customers understand this. So when it's 32 in this instance, we expect everything else that's user-based in this world to match. Okay, we want them to be aligned. Hey, CloudOlive, can you just quickly go out and fetch to see if we've got anything that we're missing out on, either underbilling or potentially overbilling? There can be reasons for it, right? There can totally be reasons for a month or 2 or longer why they won't be aligned, but finding that information is very difficult. Okay, so this is an incredible simple way. You group your products together, you tell which one should take the lead, which one should be the primary. Hey, go and tell me where the other things no longer match. Okay, and now that this has been battle tested, this has been such a key release over about 6 months ago. Now it's about how do we automate the source of truth actually coming from Microsoft in particular, and where we work from here is go, I guess just some of the config around any number of groupings. You might have a lighter base thing that's business basic, and this other essential bundle is then rolled into it or tied to it, I should say. And the customer is expecting those things to be in alignment. We just want to tell you if they are or are not prior to you deciding whether or not to invoice out. Simple as that. But with the source of truth, like anything user-based, 99 times out of 100, it's going to be something driven from either groups and or assigned counts within your Microsoft Partner Center itself. So the next piece for us is actually rolling out a way in which you can define what the NCE count is. And of course, when the subscriptions and the renewals and all the other piece are, we actually bought the name NC Easy as NCE was coming out, nceasy.com, because we thought this is so complicated. At some point, this problem's going to need to be solved. And NCE came out roughly when we started CloudOlive, and I was like, we'll get that domain. We'll deal with it in a couple of years' time, right? But we're right on the cusp of pushing this out now to like beyond our beta customers in terms of we need to provide, you need to know the source of truth count. It needs to be responsibly automated in. So understanding, even though there's 3 users because it's an NC and it's committed for a year, understanding who's assigned where, and likewise being able to toggle away, oh, it's an admin at or it's a reception at. This is our internal thing. So all of a sudden you've got 2 completely different numbers and you need to be able to leverage them to be able to do completely different things, either from a billing perspective or initially should be from a quality control standpoint. Where are we missing out in that 5 to 7%? Like how much of that 5 to 7% uplift would come from us just truing up everything else associated with the primaries that are there? Very, very, very simple, quick exercise. And as we go into the next slide, we would, like from a CloudOlive perspective, we want to give you a huge amount of value. Hopefully you've taken some cool takeaways from Raul and I today, but we would love to give you a peace of mind with your wherever you buy it from, if you buy from multi-distributors, for whatever reason, or you're converting across from one from other, like let us work with you to sanity check your baseline today from a billing perspective. And you'll be amazed at what uplift there's going to be initially, and the visibility into where there's potential gaps in your sort of technical processes, I'd say, is something that will naturally elevate when things do or don't map perfectly. Okay, so there's a QR code. My email is there. Feel free to get in touch. Happy to run that for anybody on this webinar. The only thing is we talk with Autotask and Connect, so you would be needing to run one of those 2 PSAs.
And yeah, I guess just on our side, it's really fun to always test Inforcer in practice. If you guys have a vanilla or a dev tenant that you're happy to make changes in, and like a best practice, either your tenant or a customer that you're really happy with the way it's set it up, we could definitely show you copying policies across and comparing the 2. It's always quite nice to actually see that all working in practice. So yeah, happy to set anyone up on any trials if they're interested.
Yeah, cool. I've had a question come direct here, but feel free, if there's any other questions, feel free to pop them in for everyone and or to Raul or myself. Raul, a question came through around how many, okay, is there a minimum commitment for Inforcer initially?
Yeah, 5 tenants, 12 months. But for the trial, obviously not.
5 and 12, cool. And when you roll it out, how many if I've got a like how many end customers would you roll it out in the first hit? How do partners do it?
Oh, how do partners do it? So we've set up passwordless onboarding. So through Partner Center, you could do, if your GDAP permissions are set up, you could do, in theory, all of them. So we've got, our largest customer has about 800. The most I've sat in on one go is like 100, which is pretty cool to see. Practically, the way I advise it, if you're setting up like a baseline, is you have a dev tenant that you would set up your best practices in, maybe test that with either a friendly customer or your internal tenant. And then once you're happy with how that goes, then push it out.
Cool. Well, I mean, it's 10 minutes to the hour. If there's no more other questions at all, just want to say thanks to everyone for taking the time out of their very busy days. Get in touch with Raul's, whose email address is down the bottom right, or myself. And for those who we already work with, great to see you again. For those who we're not working with, it'll be great when the time is right to do just that.
Yeah, thanks a lot, guys. Thanks for your time.
Thanks, mate.
Cheers, Adam.
Thanks, buddy.